Hello, this is a review of the Amazon Basics 25-foot HDMI cable that supports Ethernet, 3D, and audio return. Now, this comes in the Amazon frustration-free packaging. Mine came directly shipped inside this packaging, so it's got stickers on the box that I had to peel off to get back to the labels here. But then, as a package, it opens really easily. So, cut it open, pop it open, and you got your cable. So if you're just looking for a good HDMI cable, and especially a good 25-foot HDMI cable, I think this is excellent. The other sizes, again, I think all of them would be the same, again, with good quality from the Amazon Basics brand. If you need the other kinds of Amazon Basics cables, I've been always happy with those too. I have other ones here that I've been happy with. This is the optical audio cable, which I've been equally happy with. But again, remember, if you don't have all the extra features, they were thinner cables that might give you other advantages. But overall, again, the drawbacks of this is it may not fit in cable conduits because it's thicker. It is thicker, so it's not going to quite make as easy as turns. And it's heavier, so it may be pulling on the port more if it's not going to be supported in another way from the television. And then also because it can't fit in a conduit, it is black, which may not be as inconspicuous if you need to run it without covering it in a conduit, if that was your plan. But there's a lot of pros. Remember, it's going to be thicker to give you better shielding and braided and proper whatever it's going to have inside the cable to run those runs. It's honestly, if you're looking at monster cables anyways, they were going to be thicker. Two is it's a good quality cable with good connectors. And three, I would just say I've been happy with them. They've never let me down. So they always seem much better than buying the sometimes similarly priced stock cables otherwise. So if you're going to pay the same price anyways, I think Amazon Basics is a good way to go. One thing I'd mention is, speaking of distance, is if you're looking at the 25-foot, I wouldn't overkill in size and length of the cable. If you're looking at a 6-foot connection, okay, maybe you get a 9-foot cable to give yourself some room in case the TV gets moved a little bit, but don't buy 10, 15 feet of extra cable. Now, I think it's a very nice cable with a lot of pros and a few drawbacks that we'll talk about. So we're going to compare this, the 25-foot Amazon Basics cable, with the 6-foot Amazon Basics HDMI cable with Ethernet, and a basic HDMI cable that came with my DVD player. So let's talk about more of the qualities of this one. Now, it is a very thick cable relative to other cables. It's because it's going to go the full 25-foot distance and still maintain a good signal. Also, it has the 3D and the audio feedback and other things that might have actually more wires needing inside the cable. But this is noticeably thicker than the 6-foot HDMI Amazon Basics cable that just was just plus Ethernet. So we have the high speed with Ethernet, which is about this thick. And let's overlay it on top so you can kind of see the difference more clearly. So here's two examples of it, to give you an example of how much thicker this cable is. So obviously, if you're going to be running it around tight turns, it'll be a little bit easier to turn and coil a cable like this than it is going to be able with the thick cable like this. But you're going to want a cable that's about this thick here when you're going to need to run longer distances. So this gives you some strong confidence that the braided pairs and everything inside is going to be what it needs to go the 25-foot that this big piece of cable is. So again, we have our 25-foot, we have our 6-foot, which with fewer capabilities, and then we have our even thinner basic stock HDMI cable that came with my Sony DVD player. Now these are going to be not noticeably different in sizes here, just as an FYI. We're not really reviewing this cable here in particular, but you can kind of get the gist of that. Even the 6-foot HDMI cable with just the Ethernet, not the one with 3D and audio return, but just give you the gist of the range that you got here. Now, I have always been impressed with the Amazon Basics brand of cables. I find them to be constructed extremely well. I haven't had any problems with them at all, and I had long ago been buying the Monster brand cables, and I had honestly been happy with those too. But once you've gone to digital is an entirely different ballgame, in my humble opinion, compared to the old analog time. So you did get a lot of signal degradation and interference if you didn't have proper shielding on the analog signal cable. But digital is it either makes it or doesn't. And now granted, you could get other kind of artifacts in the screen if it's really just about there, but if you think about it, you know, it's with analog, it's a big sine wave, and if any part of that gets distorted, you literally lost data. But with digital, you know, you're dealing with something interpreting what is a 1 or a 0, and as long as the signal still about makes it, you're going to get full quality on that signal. So digital tends not to be remotely the problem that analog cables used to have. Of course, you're still going to have some construction issues, whether you bend it too many times or it's still just such an inferior cable that even the digital signal can't make it. But I haven't had, even with stock cables, honestly, a lot of digital cables, you're not going to really have a problem with it. Now, in terms of the connectors, I've always been very impressed with the connectors on these things here. Now, they come with this cap that's pretty tight to get on and off, but honestly, you only take it off once. But it's a nice connector. I've always had them stay in pretty well. You know, I've never had a problem with any HDMI cable coming out of the port. But they're all with the Amazon Basic cables are always very well constructed in my opinion. But we're here looking specifically at this one. One thing that I might mention now is this is such a large, thick, heavy cable overall that if you literally had this whole thing dangling from a TV that is mounted way up high in the air with nothing but it hanging downwards, this is a lot of weight and pressure to be pulling on that port. So you might find that it might not hang into the port as well as a lighter, smaller, thinner cable because of the sheer weight of this thing. And of course, if it's hanging to the side, depending on where you run the cable, you could end up with it trying to twist downwards. Now honestly, I've never actually had a problem like this with cables thus far, but just keep in mind there are other options to what you can do with the cable if it turns out to be too heavy. For example, you can, you know, just use a little wire bracket or something to just tie it nicely to the wall or run it around a hook or something like that in your entertainment center that just kind of takes off the weight from it. So that would be the only concerns that I would have with this cable, is the sheer weight would be pulling down or sideways on the port if you didn't have the cable otherwise supported. And of course the thickness will not let you make as many turns. One other thing is if you plan to hide the cable, like run it along the edge of a wall, it is a lot easier to tuck something like this underneath the edge of a carpet. So here's your slimmest cable. Again, I haven't honestly had a problem with this, but this was a basic HDMI cable. This was HDMI plus Ethernet, which was a newer standard that came out so you could eliminate your Ethernet cable, provided both ends supported that. And that's how we got here. And then this one, of course, now is the HDMI plus Ethernet plus 3D plus audio return and 25 foot. Thanks for watching the review.